What's doing, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. If you've never been here before, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up and the notification bell. Everybody else, welcome back to the channel. What we're going to talk about today is, would you survive prison? A lot of people wonder how they would do if they entered the prison system. For those of you that have never been here, I survived 17 years straight in the New York prison system, in the maximum security prison system, in serious prisons such as Attica and Sing Sing, and about 7 other prisons during my 17 years incarcerated. And so a lot of people wonder how they would do in those circumstances. Would they survive? Would they be okay? Would they have to sign into protective custody? Would they have to do this? Would they have to do that? A lot of questions. I did my 17 years in the general population, in any prison I've ever been to. And so, if was I nervous going in? Um, with my history, I'll tell you that when I was a juvenile, I was in juvenile detention centers. I was in and out of jail. I was in and out of trouble a lot. So by the time I went to prison, I wasn't what they call like a square, but still prison was a new experience. Of course, I had never been to prison before, to maximum security prison before. But the point I'm making is I was a street guy. I was involved with a lot of the criminal element on the street. I was involved with wise guys on the street. I was involved with guys that had been in and out of prison. So you never really know what to expect. And I guess people's worst fear, I would think that most people's worst fear is when they go into prison, are they going to be a target? Is someone going to rape them? So is someone going to steal all their belongings? Is someone right? So the first thing I'll tell you is this: prison is not Hollywood. Okay, all right. I'm just giving you facts. I speak straight up. You guys could ask me any questions you want in the comments, and I'll get back to each and every one of you as long as I discover that comment. In the 17 years that I was in prison, in hardcore prisons, I never saw a man get raped. Never, not one time. It's not Hollywood, you know. I do think in the old days, before my time, that this may have been a little more prevalent inside the prison system, but it stopped for many reasons. And I'm speaking for New York State right now. So the rape is possible to happen inside of other prisons, inside of other states. I'm saying it is possible, but let me tell you the reason why it's really not prevalent. One is that there are homosexuals inside of the prison. There are guys that are openly gay. And if another man wants to have a relationship with that guy, it's, I guess, possible, we should say. It is still frowned upon. In other words, if we knew of a guy who was fooling around with another guy, he wasn't someone that was welcome in our circle. It wasn't someone we were going to break bread with. It wasn't someone we were going to live in a double bunk cell with. They were kind of shunned out from the rest of the community because men in prison still have that ego. They still have that machismo about them where they don't want to be associated with someone who is gay inside of the prison system. So the people that are usually fool around with other guys aren't really part of the normal circles inside a prison. So that's one reason, is that there's openly gay people in there. I think the main reason that guys don't do it anymore is very harsh sentencing laws. Okay. If you do that to someone inside a prison, if you sexually abuse someone inside a prison, you will be charged. When you're caught, they will take you to outside court. They will give you a charge. They will add 10, 15 years to your sentence. I'm not saying that it never happens. It happens more out in society than it does inside of the prison system. But Hollywood would make you think that it happens all the time, and that's just not true. And if one prisoner does that to another prisoner, the prisoners aren't going to be dealing with that guy at all either. So those are some of the reasons I believe you really don't see it. As far as someone pushing up on you. How about this? Let me say this first. The number one way, and I want you guys to know this, I think one of the number one ways that someone can stay out of prison, I think this is a very important message to get across right now, is to beat addiction. Over 90%, well over 90% of the people that are incarcerated are there because of some type of addiction. They are there because of drugs. And alcohol is in there. Alcohol is the main one. Alcohol is a drug. Alcohol is the most dangerous drug out of all the other drugs put together. I'm not going to go on a whole speech about alcohol, but alcohol is responsible for killing people driving drunk. It's responsible for spousal abuse. It's responsible for child abuse. It's responsible for assaults. It's responsible for murder. It's responsible for robbery. It's responsible for tons of crimes, because when you drink alcohol, you are not in the correct mind frame. You cannot make the correct decisions, and your thinking pattern is completely screwed up. So alcohol is responsible for divorce. It's responsible for tons of things, right? So that's included with drugs. And over 90% of people are in prison for drugs and alcohol. Okay. Either they possessed drugs, they sold drugs, they were under the influence of drugs, they robbed something to get money to get drugs, right? They assaulted someone when they were under the influence. It just plays a major role. So if you can beat addiction, if any of you are addicted, excuse me, and you can beat addiction, the percentage or the chances of you becoming incarcerated dwindle tremendously. Because when you beat addiction, you get yourself back in the right frame of mind. And people in the right frame of mind usually don't make decisions to become incarcerated. And then there's those that don't do drugs or alcohol and just decide to commit crime and live a criminal act, and commit criminal acts. There's plenty of people there are plenty of people that don't get high and commit criminal acts as well. That's a different type of individual. Let me tell you, for a man who was incarcerated for 17 years, I don't have a tremendous amount of pity for men that are incarcerated. And I was there for 17 years. But that's only some men. Let me explain. You have the guys in prison that never worked a single day in their life. Okay? They've lived their lives to take advantage of every single person in society, including their own families. They take no personal responsibility for the position of incarceration that they are in. They blame the judge. They blame the lawyer. They blame the cop who arrested them. They blame their upbringing. They blame their family. They blame the district attorney. They blame their lawyer. They blame society. It happened to them because of this. It happened to them because of that. They take no personal responsibility, and they go in and out of prison multiple times. I've been in prison where I've seen guys go home and come back over and over again. For those guys, I have no pity, okay? Because there comes a point in your life where you need to learn the lesson that your behavior is not working, right? Those type of individuals, there's many guys in there that have absolutely no morals. There's many guys in there that have absolutely no values, right? And then there's the guys that have a conscience, the guys that made mistakes. There's plenty of prison of guys that made mistakes one time in their life and they ended up in prison for an extensive period of time, and they go in there and they are sincerely remorseful and they sincerely change. There's guys like that too. I would say it's the lower percentage of men that are in the prison system, but it is a portion. I can't give you a percentage, but if I had to guess, I would say that 70% of the men that are in prison, it's hard to have pity for them, because they take no personal responsibility at all and they just go back and forth. It becomes a vicious cycle for them, and it comes a point where you have to take personal responsibility and make a change in your life. And so those are the two type of individuals that are in there. And would you survive in prison? When you go into prison, you're going to encounter those types of men. You'll encounter men that try to take advantage of you. They're going to test you. They test you. They used to be straight up, and there still is straight up extortion, where guys just, they want your commissary, they want your packages, tell your family to send this, you'll encounter those guys, and you'll have to stand up for yourself. And if you're not willing to stand up for yourself, it's like being thrown to a pack of wolves. Where you're not segregated when you're in prison by crime. Okay, everyone is mixed together: robbers, rapists, child molesters, carjackers, murderers, people who assault people, scam artists. Everybody is in the general population together. So there's all different types of individuals and personalities. And when you walk into prison, God willing, you never walk into prison. But if you walk into prison, as I've said many times in my videos, don't be over anxious to make friends, right? Because this is noticed, right? When you walk into prison, you keep your head up. Okay, I could get into this whole psychology, right? You keep your head up, you keep your eyes open, you keep your ears open, you keep your mouth shut, and you keep your head up and your shoulders back, right? And you walk with confidence. This is true in society or in prison. You don't want to look like a soft target because everybody is watching, right? And a soft target keeps his head down and keeps his shoulders slumped, and he looks scared and he looks nervous. He looks like he's never been there before. When you have to become an actor then. Even if you're scared and you're nervous, you walk with your chest up and your shoulder up and your head up. Not overconfidence, right? Just confidence. You make eye contact with people, but you don't keep that eye contact for more than 2 or 3 seconds, because a guy in prison will tell you, yo, what are you looking at? What are you staring at? But you make eye contact with someone and you look away. That eye contact is to let that person know, I'm aware that you're in my presence. I see you, right? And you walk with that confidence, and don't start asking anyone a lot of questions. What do I do? How do I do my laundry? How do I do? When do I go to commissary? What's going to happen tomorrow? Then you just look completely green. In that stressful situation where you know nothing, you sit back and relax. They will bring you into the prison. You'll go through the process, through the medical process. They'll give you your blanket and your bedroll and your state-issued clothes. They'll take you to the cell that you're going to be housed in. If someone comes to say hello to you, hey, what's happening? Where'd you come in from? You get in, I just came in from the county jail. How's it going? When do we have chow around here? When are we going to eat? I'm starving. Don't start looking scared and anxious, because other prisoners will pick up on that, right? And unfortunately, prison is segregated. Prison is segregated by race. And when I say segregated, it's segregated to the extreme, right? And this is in any state that you go to. The blacks will be in their own groups. They'll have a bunch of different groups. The Dominicans will have their own group. The Puerto Ricans will be in their own group. The Mexicans, the white guys. Then you'll have the gangs. Whatever prison you're in has different gangs. If you're out west or down south, they'll have white supremacist gangs. They'll have the Bloods, the Latin Kings. I mean, there's so many gangs. In Texas, they have different type of gangs, right? You get involved in the gang life, you're in trouble. A lot of people think when you go into prison, you have to be in a gang. You don't have to be in a gang. Don't listen to the people. All you have to do is stand up for yourself and be a man and carry yourself like a gentleman and be respectful. Respect is one of the biggest things inside a prison. No one wants to be disrespected. Everything is about respect. You don't bump into people in prison and not say, excuse me, because you could get 150 stitches across your face. Yeah, it's not like the street where you're bumping into people and you don't say anything. You don't cut the line in prison. When people are online, in the mess hall to eat, in the package room, in the commissary, you're not cutting the line in prison. That's not lasting at all. Everything is about respect in there, okay? And you have to be courteous to the next man, right? And a lot of people have a twisted concept in prison of what respect is. You hear it all the time. Yo, you're going to respect me, son. Guys that live their lives with disrespect, it's only a matter of time until something comes to get them, right? The only way that you're going to you'll have if you have a sex charge, the problem is coming to you. If you go in there for any type of crime against a woman, a sexual crime against a woman, a sexual crime against a child, the guys will find out about it 100%. There is no, the officers may even tell the prisoners that that's your charge. But with the internet and Google, guys just call home. They give the person your name. Yo, Google this guy. Put his prison number in the system. Tell me what he's in prison for. You have one of those crimes, you're better off signing into protective custody as soon as possible because the guys are going to get you. But as long as you don't have a bad crime, and as long as you're not a rat, and you mind your own business, and you carry yourself like a gentleman, right? I know plenty of guys that went into prison and they weren't criminals. They didn't have a criminal bone in their body, right? But they didn't try to act like a tough guy. We had my friend Clary, the school teacher. Plenty of guys that kill people driving drunk end up in prison, where they're not real criminals. They're not on the street hustling drugs and selling drugs. So it's just a matter of carrying yourself the right way. Yeah, that's very, very important. Very important. Another thing that happens is by the time you would enter prison, this is usually after a period of when you were in the county jail, because you would spend time in the county jail. For those of you that don't know the difference between prison and jail, I've explained this many times before. Jail is a place where you are waiting for your court case to finish. When you get arrested, they put you in jail. Jail is a place where you stay if the judge sentences you to under 1 year. If you get 8 months in jail, 6 months in jail, 30 days in jail, 1 week in jail, you stay in the county jail. And you also stay in the jail if you are waiting to go to prison. The judge gave you 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. You're in jail waiting to be shipped up to prison. Prison is a place where you're doing a year or more. In New York State, they usually put you in a medium security prison when you have 5 years or less. You go to a medium security prison. If you have 5 years or more, you go to a maximum security prison. But there are some exceptions to the rule. It depends on your crime. It depends if you have escapes on your record. It depends what programs you need. That's all done in what's called classification. The prison will classify you and give you a classification number and decide what prison you get to. But when you're in jail and then you get sent to prison, when you get to prison, you'll probably know a few guys that you were sitting in jail with. And so that is almost a comfort. That's not necessarily true. You might not know anyone. You might not know anyone because there's like 40 prisons. But if you sat in the county jail for 6 months, 8 months, a year, some of those guys went up to prison. When you get up to prison, you'll run into one or two of them and they'll explain the routine to you. So that makes it a little easier. Just because I'm saying that you would survive or you might survive doesn't mean that you won't have problems either. So I don't want you to get that in your head that everything could just be smooth, and I'm making prison out to be like Disneyland that you could just skate through. When I'm talking about like you might know some of the guys in prison from jail, I'll give you an example. When I was in jail, I was on Rikers Island. I have a few videos up about Rikers Island that you can watch about my experience on Rikers Island. And I spent 3 years on Rikers Island and fighting my case, going back and forth to the hospital, fighting my case, going to the mental institution, back to Rikers Island. I did that 4 or 5 times back and forth. And on Rikers Island, in jail, you'll be tested probably a lot more than you're tested in prison, because jail is like a different animal. Everyone's withdrawing off of drugs. They're just coming off the street. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know if they're going to get 30 days or 30 years. Everybody's stressed out, and jail doesn't really have the organization of prison. And so when in Rikers Island, I was out of control because I figured I was going to die in prison anyway. I really did. I believed I was going to die in prison. I was charged with murder. I said, they're going to give me 25 to life. I was 24 years old at the time. I said, I'm never going to see freedom. I was myself coming off of drugs. And I don't say this, if you see my 350 videos, that I have online. I don't say this to sound like a tough guy, but I was always a fighter my whole life. I love to fight. I grew up fighting, boxing, wrestling, doing martial arts, fighting in the bars in my neighborhood. I loved to fight. I was a tough kid. And when I got to Rikers Island and I was tested and I beat the shit out of a few people, right? That helped a lot. You know what I mean? Because guys would point the finger and say, yo, you see that white guy over there? Stay far away from him. You know what I mean? I didn't tolerate any disrespect at all, and I didn't tolerate any wrongdoing. I got into fights over the phone. I got into fights over food. I got into fights over the shower. I got into fights over drugs, you know. And then once they saw that I was willing to stand up for myself, once they saw that I was a good fighter, that word travels into prison because the guys that you're in jail with, right, a lot of them end up in prison too. So when I got to prison, that word traveled. And dudes would be like, "Yo, I was on Rikers Island with Fish. Fish is out of control, right? Fish will fight at the drop of a hat, you know." And so, I mean, unfortunately, I'll be honest, I stabbed people on Rikers Island because I had to, right? And so that word traveled when I got to prison. And when I got to prison, the guys understood that I'd be willing to stand up for myself. But even when I got to prison, I had to stand up for myself as well. Especially when you look at me, I'm a 5'6" white guy, right? And there's a lot of people that are ignorant from Long Island. They think you're soft because you're small, or they think you're soft because you're from Long Island. But so I had to teach them the hard way, right? And so I said I don't say that to sound like a tough guy. What I'm saying is that made it easier for me in the transition. You know what I mean? Because the word will travel with you from jail. Anything you do in jail is going to travel with you into prison. If you're a rat in jail, the guys in prison will know about it. If you have a bad charge, you go to jail for a bad charge, the guys in prison will know about it. You know, if you give the cops information in jail, the guys in prison will know about it, right? So that word travels, you know, and so you have to be very conscious of that and realize, yo, I'm going into prison for a long time. Let me carry myself the proper way, right? Because the word is going with you. You know, and so even when I got to prison, if you check out my video about walking into Sing Sing for the first time, you know, I was in the first 2 weeks, I was in two fights. One fight was because I had some weed and this guy tried to put some pressure on me. That's why you got to stay away from drugs in prison. I forgot to tell you that. There's one guy who tried to put some pressure on me, so he tried to get me to give him some weed, and I had to end up beating the crap out of him. You know, then another guy, when I was coming from the package room, he was scoping my package, looking at all the stuff I was carrying. I had to really hurt that guy bad, stick a screwdriver to his neck after I beat the shit out of him. So, you know, you will be tested. Even if you carry yourself the right way, situations are going to come, and you got to be willing to stand up for yourself. But you'll get involved, like I said, with that crew, with a crew of your own guys. You know, the people of your own race will bring you in as long as you don't have a bad crime, and they'll school you about everything. But there's a lot of psychology involved in it. A lot of psychology involved in it. You stay away from the drugs. You stay away from gambling, because gambling is big in prison. You stay away from the homosexuals. You will avoid 90% of the problems. But there will be always that guy that tries to friendly extort you. Yo, when you go to commissary, could you get me a pack of cigarettes? I got you back. Then you buy him the pack of cigarettes. Commissary comes, he doesn't give it back to you, or he keeps coming to you. Yo, can I get a cup of coffee? Yo, can I get another cigarette? Yo, I'm starving. You got a honey bun? Could I get a? He's friendly extorting you, right? You're feeding this guy. You don't get into doing that. When someone comes to you, if they're not in your own crew, they're not in your own thing, and they ask you for something, you can give it to them one time if you want to be a nice guy. I took care of a lot of guys in there, but I never let it get out of hand. If a guy came to me, no matter what he was, Spanish, black, white, Asian, yo, Fish, you got a honey bun? I'm starving. You got an extra honey bun? Yeah, here you go. I have no problem giving some food or a cup of coffee or cigarette to the next man, no matter who they are. But then when they come back again, yo, Fish, I'm still hungry. You have to put your foot down. This is where you got to stand up for yourself. You tell the guy, no, listen, I can't keep taking care of you, brother. You don't say it disrespectful. I can't keep taking care of you, brother. I only got a little bit for myself. You know what I'm saying? That's it. If the guy gets an attitude, if he turns around and says, yo, that's fucked up, I tell him, yo, listen, F you, man. What's up? What you want to do? I told you can't come back. I gave you something already. You think you're going to keep coming back to me and taking stuff off of me? It don't work like that. You better go see the next man because that's not happening here. Right? And then if he tried to do something stupid, then it's on. But you say it respectful. Listen, you can't keep coming back here. I gave you something when you were hungry, or I gave you a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? But I got to take care of myself, man. That's it. Usually the dude to be like, no, I hear you. That's all right. You see the way he responds. He might respond so politely and like a gentleman. I give it to him anyway. Nah, yeah, right here. Listen, I give it to you this one more time. Common sense, reading situations for what they are. Of course, you get a rule book when you go into prison that explains everything, too. They hand you a couple of rule books. They hand you a disciplinary book that tells you the things that you can and can't do. And then they hand you a book on that tells you when the laundry is, when the commissary is, how to go to sick call, how to get a visit. All this is explained to you in two little books that you have to sign for, and they give them to you. When I first went into prison, I went into Sing Sing. Sing Sing was the first prison that I went to. And I was put in I ended up in B block. I mean, I was originally put in a place called 5 building. After 5 building, I went to A block for a little while. Then I ended up going to B block. But I remember one of my first neighbors when they put me in the cell was a black guy named Blue. And Blue had over 20 years in prison already. And I'm just moving into the cell to give you an idea of my mind frame. Am I nervous? Yeah, I'm a little nervous. It's my first time in prison. I'm in a serious prison. I'm facing 25 years to serve up to 20. My sentence was 12 and a half to 25. They're dropping me in this cell. I really don't know anyone. And they moved me into this cell next to a guy named Blue. And Blue had, like I said, over 20 years in prison. And Blue explained everything to me. You know what I mean? And when I went in there, I don't over talk. He knocked on my wall. Yo, what's up? That's how it started. I say, what's happening? He was like, yo, my name's Blue. Where'd you come from? I said, I just came from Rikers Island. I know you don't give too much extra information. He's like, no doubt, man. He's like, yo, you hungry? You hungry? So I didn't take any food from him. I knew not to take food from him. This is common sense because I don't know anything about Blue. I don't know if he's a rapist. I don't know if he's a child molester. I don't know if he's a rat. I don't know anything about him. And I don't want word to spread throughout the prison that I'm eating with the child molester. Or maybe Blue is desperate to make a friend because of that. But that wasn't the case. Blue turned out to be a real good dude, right? And so he's like, yo, you want anything to eat? I says, nah, I'm good, I'm good. I says, what time they call chow around here? He's like, the officer's going to come around, and he does a go around. He has a list. You tell him where you want to go. You tell him chow in the yard, which means you want to go eat, and then you want to go to the yard. And so when the officer was walking around, it's my first time, I hear other guys saying, dirty cell, chow and yard, 31 cell, chow and yard. When he gets to my cell, I tell him, 38 cell, chow and yard. That means when chow comes, he opens your cell. And in other words, what I'm saying is I just got into the routine. And that's what happens is you just get into the routine. And now I'm walking to the mess hall. I'm walking to chow. I don't know anyone, right? I'm just a new face. But you kind of just blend in. Everyone knows you're a new face, but you kind of just blend in because there's 1,000 guys. And you just start following them. And you start following them into the routine. You see the way the guys are walking, you just start walking. And but it is definitely nerve-wracking. It's definitely nerve-wracking. So would you survive is the ultimate question. Yes, you will survive as long as you have common sense, and as long as you don't think you're going to go in there and disrespect people, and don't go in there thinking you're the baddest in the world, because there's always someone badder. You know what I mean? Keep your head up, keep your shoulders back, and you start doing your time. you know that's all I really have to say on that one right now. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. If you guys have any questions, you let me know. I will talk to you later. Bye bye.